And this is the second installment for Chapter 11, Section 1. If you can remember, the end of Part 1 was Octavian getting his name changed to Augustus, and he becomes the emperor, the first emperor of Rome. And this is roughly 27 BC. So you can kind of see here at Caesar's death on this map, everything in this kind of salmon color and yellow, that was part of Rome. So that's basically what it was when Augustus took over. And then during his reign, he's going to add this kind of aqua color. So you can see some of it. Actually, Egypt also is then added to the empire during Augustus's time. And then eventually, this lighter green will become part of the Roman Empire. And that is when Rome is at its largest, which is around 117 AD under the Emperor Trajan. Right? You can see Britain's actually added, something that Julius Caesar couldn't even get done, but eventually Rome will get that done. And it's going to be because of what happens during this next 200 years then, during this time period that has started with Augustus, and then we'll go throughout some of the following emperors all the way through Marcus Aurelius around 180 AD. And it's a time period known as Pax Romana. Okay, so we'll get to that in a little bit. Pax Romana, which means Roman peace. Now, one of the things that's going to happen is Rome's empire is going to grow dramatically over the next 200 years, as that map shows. And a lot of that is because of the peacefulness there in Rome itself, inside the city of Rome, that Augustus will achieve. And what ends up happening, Rome pretty much controls the Mediterranean at the beginning of Augustus's rule, and they will continue to control the Mediterranean Sea well into the 300-400s even. They gain all of Gaul, which is today France. They gain Central Europe, around here in the Alps, places like that. As you can see, the Danube River, a famous river, up to the Danube River. They will take over Asia Minor, all of this area here that at one time had been in control of Mesopotamia. Here's the Tigris and Euphrates, so this is kind of where civilization began. Babylon, today it's known as Baghdad, and those areas. And then they will also control all of North Africa, which includes Egypt, Carthage, which they will actually rebuild Carthage themselves again. What they do by gaining all of this territory is they actually control most of the gold that's in the known region, much of the farmland throughout this area, so that they can feed the people of their republic, and especially here in Rome. They will also gain many of the natural resources of these provinces, and they will be able to take resources from all of these areas, bring it back to Rome, and then what they will do with those resources, they will turn those into goods that people throughout the world want. And they will trade goods that they make here in Rome all the way over here into China, which would be, of course, way over here on the other side of the page, things like that. But they're able to, on that Silk Road and everything else, trade with other civilizations out there. And this allows for Rome to become very, very wealthy. People of Rome themselves to become wealthy, and it becomes a certain point of pride to be a Roman. Some of these places will actually be conquered very easily because they want to have that pride of even being a Roman. So some of these areas don't even put up a fight, and they will just say, hey, yeah, we're okay becoming Roman. All we have to do is give you some tax money, maybe send some soldiers into the army. Sure, as long as you let us live our life and things like that. And that's pretty much what the Romans will do, is let the people live the life that they want. Something else that helps Rome, though, grow is that they will actually institute a different way of trading. And one of the trade is that the Romans will give coins to other civilization, Roman coins, in exchange for goods. And it ends up being that these other places accept Roman coins, and then these Roman coins are basically passed around all kinds of different civilizations, and it becomes an accepted means of trade, and it allows Rome to prosper and become wealthy. Just like here in the United States, the US dollar. You could go to China and the US dollar might get you something over there in China or in France or in Russia or in Mexico or in other places like that. They will accept the US dollars in a lot of these places throughout the world, and it allows the U.S. That's what used to allow the U.S. to become prosperous. It's kind of going a little bit backwards now, but that's what allowed Rome to become economically prosperous, was with this trade, that they didn't have to have a good, some kind of a product, to change for another product. They could just make coins in exchange for those products, just like we do today. Another thing that leads to this prosperity is, like I said a little bit earlier, was Pax Romana. in Rome itself, or inside Italy and inside other parts of the empire, it was really peaceful. Before Augustus's time, you have Julius Caesar with his army causing problems. You have Sulla and Marius fighting each other, Pompey and Crassus, Octavian and Mark Antony. But once Augustus takes over, it really does lead to about a 200-year time period of peacefulness inside Rome, where Romans are not fighting other Romans. Yes, the Romans would go out and conquer other people, usually for some kind of a resource or trade or even for slaves. But inside Rome itself, the empire, things were very peaceful. And when it's peaceful, it allows prosperity. Okay? And that also is what allows for Rome's achievements. The things that we know of for Rome today, many of their achievements in science and engineering, and then their architecture and art, and their literature and languages, and even in law and things like that. And so that's where we're going to go now, because it's their accomplishments and things like that that really leaves us today with a sense of how the Romans lived, because we still use a lot of those things today. All right, so we'll start with science and engineering. First of all, they took a practical approach to their science and engineering. It was really, they were just looking for results that benefited Roman society. That's what they wanted. It wasn't that they were just going out to look for some cool things or whatever. They wanted to know, how can this benefit our society? So you had astronomers that would study the stars, and they developed a new calendar, a calendar that is still used today. You have this Greek doctor Galen. He was part of the empire. He's in the early 100s, and he's going to study anatomy. So he's going to study the heart, the body, things like that. He takes a look at the valves in the heart, and kind of shows the difference between arteries and veins. And a lot of his studies are still used by doctors today. You have great builders. Okay, Romans used this practical use for science and engineering. Okay, you have these great builders that are going to build structures like this right here. This is a Roman aqueduct. So this is a structure that would carry water up here in this top channel down into the city. So it might be from the mountains, let's say 80 miles away, and it would bring fresh water into the city. Much like we have today underground. We used pipes and things like that underground. But this was built by the Romans, and they were great builders. Okay? And one of the great things that they had that allowed them to build these huge structures was this new type of concrete or cement that they made, mixing mineral like lime with volcanic rock and ash. And because of this mixture of these materials, it made a much harder material when it dried, and most importantly, it was also watertight. So they could actually put this material down in the water, down into rivers, so they could cross rivers with bridges and things like that. And it allowed for them to build bigger and build stronger, which is a big deal for anybody. Another thing that they were very well known for still today are the Roman roads. Okay, so the materials they had, but their designs that they built their road in layers. Okay, so it wasn't just one flat layer of, let's say, cement. No, it would have some sand and some gravel and some cement and some rock, and it allowed water to run through it. It was a highly durable road, which means it lasted for a long time. And honestly, there are still some Roman roads throughout Europe that are there today. They may not be used for roads, more as showpieces and things like that, but they haven't been destroyed in 2,000 years. Where you have highways here in this country where if they're good for 5 years, that's a miracle. Okay, so these Roman roads, they were long lasting, even after centuries, hundreds of years of traffic. The Romans also created structures such as the arch. And the arch, what makes the arch design so important, such as right here on this aqueduct, is that an arch can support more weight, which means you can build bigger, you can build higher, you can build longer spans, things like that. And it was just the simple design of the arch. And this one rock here called the keystone, which is right there, the last piece you would put in the arch design. But you would build it in this design here, and it distributes the weight out down into the legs and things like that. So the arch really becomes a big deal when they go into their building and things like that. And then, of course, the last thing being the aqueduct. Okay, this aqueduct is just that raised channel, that bridge that had water going across the top of it, and it brings in this fresh water, and it's able to cross valleys and go through mountains and things like that. Some of those Roman aqueducts are still there today. Certainly not used for the same thing, but they've lasted the test of time. Another thing is a vault. Okay, the vault that Romans are able to use. I think there might be a picture of a vault somewhere on here. But anyways, the vault design where you would use the arches, a series of arches, a set of arches, and then you could build a vault that supports the roof of a building. And because of that, they're able to build these huge structures, these indoor structures with these large domed roofs and things like that, that you have this huge open area. It allowed them to build bigger and stronger. So the vault, very important. Now we go to architecture and art, and pretty much architecture and art. I just want to say they basically copied a lot of things from the Greeks. They will use Greek columns and marble, just like the Greeks did to build their buildings, things like that. The Romans are going to be known for that also. So a lot of their Greek designs, things like that. What else? They will also use in art. They'll be very realistic. Roman artists were known for being realistic in the way that they presented the people of their time period. The Greeks, on the other hand, the Greeks kind of represented their people as godlike figures. So in art, in paintings and sculptures, the Greeks would paint or sculpt as if they were a godlike figure, where the Romans were, more about natural. They would just, okay, if this is a painting of or a picture or a sculpture of Julius Caesar, it's going to look like Julius Caesar. Or commoners. They did a lot of paintings of just regular folks doing daily work. So it wasn't so heavenly or with the gods. A lot of it was just creating real life pictures of people out in the fields, peasants out there or the plebeians out there working, that type of stuff. So their art was really realistic, and it showed real life as it should be. All right, another accomplishment was through literature and language. We've talked a little bit about some of the literature before, such as Virgil, who wrote the Aeneid, kind of this history of the beginnings and foundings of Rome. So he's part of this time period here. You're going to have another poet named Ovid. Ovid right here. He wrote poems about Roman mythology, and a lot of the Roman mythology and things like that will lead to what we know of as the history of Rome. Roman writers can make a lot of speeches and dramas and plays that are still used today. Now, the language that was written in, of course, was Latin at that time period. That was the official language of Rome. Latin was. So their government documents, their plays, all their literature, things like that would be written into Latin. And then Latin is going to later develop other languages out of it that we still know of today, known as the Romance languages, such as Italian, French, Spanish, and other languages. That will still use a lot of derivatives of Latin. I mean, we still use Latin words today when we're talking about, especially in law, in government and things like that. But etc. Circus is a Latin word. Veto we've already used before. That's a Latin word. And some other things that were influenced by the Greeks. So at some point, probably in your school history, you're going to study Spanish. It kind of comes from the Latin language of the Romans, which makes sense because if you go back to this map here, you can see that Spain, France, Italy, of course, other places, they were once controlled by the Romans. And so that language, of course, certainly would come from some of that area right there. All right, and then a final thing really to talk about is law. Okay, law was a big deal in Rome. Law is a big deal in the United States today. Roman law at that time period when the Romans were in charge was basically enforced throughout the world. So Roman law today is known as civil law. Many of the traditions and customs we have in law come from the Romans, such as other places in the world do the same thing. Africa, Asia, the Americas, we all developed our own code of law based off of old Roman law. So not only the 12 tables, but laws that were written during the empire's time. Okay, so that's pretty much the end of section 1. I know that was a lot. We're going to be dealing a lot with these accomplishments as people introduce their presentations or give their presentations about some of the accomplishments, but this was just a quick overview of the end of this section. Okay, so hopefully you were able to fill out notes while you were doing this also. All right, thank you guys.